Imagine standing under a starlit sky, looking up at the vast expanse of the cosmos, and asking yourself one of humanity's oldest and most profound questions. Can the universe be understood? For millennia, this question has driven philosophers, scientists, and mathematicians. It's the ultimate quest to unravel the principles that govern everything, from the tiniest particles to the grandest galaxies. Stephen Wolfram, a physicist and computer scientist, tackled this question head-on with a bold and revolutionary idea. In his seminal work, A New Kind of Science, Wolfram proposed that the complexity of the universe might emerge from simple computational rules. He was captivated by the potential of cellular automata, mathematical systems where simple binary rules could generate stunningly complex patterns. Could the cosmos itself operate on a similar principle? Wolfram believed that by studying these computational systems, we might uncover the very rules that govern physical reality. At the core of Wolfram's approach was Boolean algebra, the mathematics of true and false, of ones and zeros, the foundation of modern digital computing. Boolean algebra offers a structured framework for understanding logical relationships. Its 14 foundational theorems, highlighted by Wolfram, include principles like commutativity, associativity, distributivity, identity laws, and De Morgan's laws. These theorems are essential for designing digital circuits and algorithms and for manipulating logical expressions. For Wolfram, they were more than just mathematical tools. They were the gateway to modeling the universe itself. If the cosmos operates on logical principles, perhaps these theorems could help us simulate and understand reality at its deepest level. But as Wolfram pursued this vision, he ran into a profound obstacle: computational irreducibility. This concept suggests that for certain systems, there are no shortcuts to understanding their future states. The only way to know what will happen next is to simulate every step in detail. While this was a groundbreaking insight, it presented serious challenges. First, Wolfram confronted overwhelming complexity. Even the simplest rules could produce behaviors so intricate that predicting outcomes became virtually impossible. The computational power required to simulate these systems spiraled far beyond practical limits. Second, his work exposed the limitations of reductionism, the idea that you can fully understand a complex system by breaking it down into its individual parts. For computationally irreducible systems, the whole cannot be understood merely by dissecting the components. The emergent behavior is greater than the sum of the parts. Finally, Wolfram's findings pointed to an unsettling possibility: unpredictability in fundamental systems. If the universe operates like a computationally irreducible system, then there may be aspects of reality that remain inherently unknowable, no matter how deeply we probe the underlying rules. Wolfram's work was a leap forward in how we think about complexity and computation, but it left us grappling with a daunting question. If the universe is so intricately irreducible, how can we ever hope to fully understand it? Reflecting on the limitations of Wolfram's approach, we turn to a profound and fundamental insight from the great mathematician Leonhard Euler. Euler didn't just caution us about the limits of mathematical systems, he demonstrated it through one of his most celebrated achievements. His work laid the foundation for the idea that no single system of mathematics can fully describe all cases, let alone describe itself. This principle isn't just philosophical, it's mathematically rigorous. And Euler's contributions earned him recognition and accolades, forever influencing how we approach the boundaries of logic and mathematics. Euler's work reminds us that the universe doesn't conform to one tidy set of rules. Reality is far too vast and interconnected for a singular framework to encapsulate its complexity. Each branch of mathematics, from algebra to calculus, from topology to number theory, was developed to address specific phenomena. These tools complement one another, but cannot replace one another. If Euler is correct, and his legacy leaves no room for doubt, then any attempt to explain all of reality using a singular framework, as Wolfram tried to do with Boolean algebra, is fundamentally flawed. Wolfram's reliance on Boolean algebra was not unreasonable at first glance. Boolean algebra, with its binary logic of true and false, 1 and 0, is the backbone of digital computation and a powerful tool for understanding discrete systems. But Euler's insight tells us that no matter how robust or universal Boolean algebra might seem, it cannot capture the continuous, dynamic, and contextual interplay that defines so much of the natural world. To use Euler's terms, the mathematics of Boolean algebra is a thread in the tapestry of the universe, not the whole cloth. Wolfram's attempt to weave all of reality from this single thread couldn't succeed. Not because of a failure in his computational models, but because his foundational choice was at odds with the nature of reality itself. This brings us to the critical divergence between Wolfram's approach and the path we propose. Wolfram sought to describe complexity by assembling fragments, rules of Boolean algebra, bits of computation, without addressing the relationships and context that give systems their meaning. Euler's work reveals why this fails. The universe is not reducible to isolated fragments. Its truths emerge from the interplay of its parts, requiring us to embrace a broader relational perspective. If Euler is right, then Wolfram must be wrong. And to move forward, we must look not to reductionist frameworks like Boolean algebra, but to methods that acknowledge and integrate the context, the dynamics, and the interconnections of systems. It's not enough to model what happens when one thing changes. We must model how those changes propagate through networks of relationships to create the emergent behaviors we observe. Euler didn't simply warn us. He gave us the tools to move beyond reductionist approaches, and it is through his legacy that we now seek a paradigm capable of addressing the challenges that Wolfram's method could not overcome. Despite Euler's wisdom, attempts to explain the universe within a single mathematical framework persist. Stephen Wolfram's approach exemplifies this tendency. By anchoring his exploration in Boolean algebra, the binary logic of true and false, 1 and 0, Wolfram sought universal truths, hoping to reduce the universe's complexity to simple computational rules. But this choice reveals a fundamental flaw. Boolean algebra is an immensely powerful tool. As the foundation of digital computing, it has revolutionized technology and shaped modern systems. Yet, its binary structure struggles to capture the nuanced, dynamic behaviors observed in the natural world. When applied to real-world phenomena, its limitations quickly become apparent. Boolean algebra simplifies relationships into stark black-and-white terms, masking the shades of correlation and interaction that characterize complex systems. For example, weather patterns emerge from countless interdependent atmospheric variables. These variables often behave in ways that appear erratic but are deeply linked. Binary logic lacks the capacity to represent this complexity because it cannot address the underlying factors driving such variations. This simplification frequently leads to incomplete explanations. Consider weather modeling again. Boolean algebra, which deals in discrete states, fails to describe a system that evolves continuously through nonlinear interactions. The result is an oversimplified, static view of an inherently dynamic process. When models rooted in Boolean logic fail to align with observed realities, their applications also falter. A telling example lies in cosmology. Early gravitational models, based on oversimplified assumptions, could not account for the observed motions of galaxies. The discrepancy was so significant that scientists introduced the concept of dark matter, a placeholder for unexplained gravitational effects. The issue wasn't just observational, it stemmed from relying on a mathematical framework ill-suited to describe the full complexity of the system. At the core of these shortcomings is a critical oversight, the neglect of contextual dynamics. Real-world systems are never isolated. They are shaped by intricate networks of influences, each contributing to the whole. Boolean logic, with its focus on isolated cause and effect relationships, often ignores this broader context. It tells us how one change affects another, but fails to account for how interconnected changes ripple through the system. Defining relationships between two variables in isolation is akin to listening to scattered fragments of a conversation and trying to grasp its full meaning. Without understanding the context, the interplay of all participants, their tone, and their shared environment, the essence of the dialogue remains elusive. To truly understand complex systems, we must move beyond reductionist methods and embrace frameworks that reflect the interconnected nature of reality. When scientific theories fail to align with observation, the appropriate response isn't to patch the gap with speculation, but to revisit the foundational principles of the theory itself. Stepping back to reassess isn't just good practice, it's an imperative. Without it, we risk building layers of abstraction on top of assumptions that may already be flawed, leading us further from understanding rather than closer to it. Consider the case of dark matter, which has become emblematic of this issue. Observations of galactic motion revealed discrepancies. Stars on the edges of galaxies move as though there is far more mass than we can observe. Instead of questioning the completeness of our gravitational theories, scientists introduced a hypothetical solution: dark matter, an undetectable substance that supposedly accounts for the missing mass. But this approach assumes the existing gravitational framework is correct, despite its failure to match observations. The gap in the model was filled with yet another model, which was then treated as if it represented reality. This works only if the original theory is flawless, a claim that's unsubstantiated and, in this case, demonstrably problematic. By replacing observation with abstraction, modern science risks drifting away from the first principles that anchor our understanding. When the foundation of a theory proves incomplete, our first step must not be to elaborate but to scrutinize and, if necessary, rebuild from the ground up. Dark matter represents what happens when science prioritizes mathematical consistency over empirical clarity. It exemplifies the dangers of failing to reassess. Instead of exploring whether our understanding of gravity might need revision, we've pursued an increasingly elaborate hypothesis to compensate for its shortcomings. This is not progress, it's a detour. Stepping back to reassess becomes unavoidable if we wish to make genuine progress. The anomalies we encounter aren't just nuisances, they're signals that something foundational has been overlooked or misinterpreted. They challenge us to question whether our tools and frameworks are the right ones for the job. In the case of dark matter, the question should not have been, what can we invent to fill this gap? But rather, what is the gap telling us about the limitations of our existing theories? The deeper lesson is this: to advance, we must resist the temptation to smooth over inconsistencies with abstractions. Instead, we must reconnect with first principles, interrogate our assumptions, and seek frameworks that reflect the interconnected complexity of the natural world. Without this commitment to foundational rigor, science risks mistaking its abstractions for reality, leading us further from the truth rather than closer to it. Now, let's step into the world of triadic logic, a framework that doesn't just accommodate complexity, it thrives on it. Triadic logic doesn't merely add a third variable, it represents a paradigm shift. It acknowledges that the natural world is inherently multidimensional and interconnected, and it provides the tools to model relationships that binary logic cannot adequately capture. Triadic logic fundamentally replaces the limitations of binary thinking, where traditional logic reduces relationships to pairwise interactions, true or false, 1 or 0. Triadic logic recognizes that reality is rarely so simple. It embraces the interplay of three interconnected elements, offering a framework that reflects the natural complexity of the world. Triadic logic doesn't merely extend binary thinking, it exposes it as flawed, incomplete, and even dangerous. By ignoring the third variables always present in complex systems, binary logic creates models that oversimplify and distort, leading to failures in understanding and application. At its core, triadic logic captures the relationships among three elements in a way that ensures balance and interdependence. In this framework, if one element is true or present, the other two must also be true or present. Conversely, if one element is false or absent, the other two must also be false or absent. This principle of mutual reinforcement ensures that the system remains stable, a state known as homeostasis. Triadic logic forces us to seek the often overlooked third variable that contextualizes and balances the other two. It shifts our focus from isolated cause and effect relationships to the dynamic, interdependent networks that govern real-world systems. To see this in action, let's explore 3 examples. Imagine a close-knit group of 3 friends, Alice, Bob, and Charlie. Their bond is built on mutual support, with each friendship as strong as the others. This is a coexistence triad. The relationship between any 2 friends implies the connection to the third. If Alice and Bob are friends, and Bob and Charlie are friends, then Alice and Charlie must also be friends. The harmony of this group depends on the mutual reinforcement of all 3 relationships. But if one friendship falters, the balance of the group is disrupted. This triad reveals the interconnected nature of relationships, where the stability of the whole relies on the integrity of every part. Now consider a workplace scenario involving a reinforcement triad. Imagine 3 team members collaborating on a cyclical project. Person A hands off their work to Person B, who builds on it and passes it to Person C. Person C refines the output and provides feedback to help Person A improve the next iteration. The success of the system depends on each person contributing fully, as the output of one becomes the input for the next. If Person B stops participating, the loop breaks down entirely. Triadic logic captures this interdependence, showing how continuous feedback and reinforcement sustain the system as a whole. For a final example, think about the causal triad of the water cycle. The sun's heat causes water to evaporate. Evaporation leads to cloud formation, and clouds eventually produce rain that replenishes bodies of water. Each step causes the next, creating a sequential but interdependent relationship among the 3 elements. Remove anyone, stop the sun's heat, halt evaporation, or prevent rainfall, and the entire system collapses. Triadic logic reveals the interconnected dependencies within this cycle, which cannot be reduced to isolated interactions. These examples highlight the power of triadic logic to model the complexity of real-world systems. In a coexistence triad, relationships are mutually reinforcing. In a reinforcement triad, contributions form a cyclical loop of dependency. In a causal triad, sequential elements sustain the entire system. What they all share is the inability to be understood through binary logic alone. Without accounting for the third element, the relationships, feedback, and dynamics that define the system would remain hidden. Triadic logic doesn't supplement binary thinking. It replaces it. It reveals that binary models fail not because they're insufficiently complex, but because they're fundamentally wrong. They omit the broader context and interconnected dynamics that shape reality. Triadic logic challenges us to go beyond oversimplified cause and effect, urging us to see the relationships that bind systems together. This isn't just a refinement, it's a necessary shift in how we think if we are to grasp the full complexity of the world. Why does triadic logic matter? Why not simply stick with the familiar simplicity of binary logic? The answer lies in the richness and accuracy that triadic logic offers, a depth of understanding that binary logic, by its very nature, cannot achieve. Triadic logic reflects the way the real world works. Many systems in nature and society are not governed by simple pairwise interactions. Variables often operate in interdependent triads or even more complex networks. Consider an ecosystem. Predator, prey, and environment form an interwoven triad where each element influences and is influenced by the others. Or think of an economy. Supply, demand, and market regulation are deeply interconnected. These systems can't be reduced to binary relationships without losing critical insights. Triadic logic mirrors these natural dynamics, capturing relationships that are essential for understanding how the world actually works. This framework also enhances our ability to interpret complex phenomena. By recognizing and modeling 3-way interdependencies, triadic logic provides explanations that are both more accurate and more meaningful. This improved interpretability allows us to make better predictions, design more effective interventions, and gain deeper insights into the systems we study. It's not just about solving problems, it's about solving them in ways that align with the reality of how those problems arise. And perhaps most importantly, triadic logic helps us avoid the trap of oversimplification. Binary logic, with its rigid pairs of inputs and outputs, often leads to conclusions that are incomplete or misleading. It forces us to think in terms of isolated causes and effects, ignoring the web of relationships that define most systems. Triadic logic, by contrast, embraces these nuances, ensuring that our understanding reflects the complexity of the phenomena we're examining. One of the most powerful aspects of triadic logic is that it remains grounded in observable reality. Before we abstract concepts into mathematical equations, triadic logic starts with what we can see, measure, and experience. This grounding keeps us tethered to reality, reducing the risk of drifting into theoretical constructs that fail when applied to the real world. By anchoring itself in observation, triadic logic ensures that our models are both rigorous and applicable. To illustrate, consider a classic scientific example: the behavior of gases. This system is governed by three key variables: pressure, volume, and temperature. These variables form a tightly interwoven triad. Changes in one affect the other two. Increase the temperature of a gas, and if the volume remains constant, the pressure will rise. Decrease the volume while holding temperature constant, and pressure increases again. Adjust the pressure, and you can observe changes in both temperature and volume. This relationship is encapsulated in the ideal gas law, which ties these three variables together mathematically. The behavior of gases can't be fully understood by examining just pressure and volume, or pressure and temperature, in isolation. All three variables must be considered simultaneously to accurately describe the system. The gas laws are a perfect demonstration of triadic logic in action. They show how systems in the real world rarely operate in isolated pairs. Instead, they involve dynamic interdependencies that only make sense when the full context is accounted for. Triadic logic isn't just a new way of thinking, it's a necessary tool for understanding the complexity of the world around us. Adopting triadic logic requires us to fundamentally shift the way we think about systems and the relationships within them. It's not just a tweak to traditional methods, it's a transformation in perspective. First, it moves us from reductionism to holism. Instead of breaking systems down into isolated parts, we focus on how those parts work together to form a cohesive whole. Complex systems are defined not just by their components, but by the interactions that bind them. Triadic logic allows us to see these interactions for what they are, integral to understanding the system itself. Second, it shifts us from simplicity to complexity. Traditional approaches often favor simplification, distilling systems down to pairwise relationships that ignore their full richness. Triadic logic recognizes that complexity isn't a problem to be avoided, it's a reality to be embraced. By accepting this complexity, we open ourselves to deeper and more accurate understanding. Third, it redirects us from abstract to concrete. Instead of beginning with theoretical models, triadic logic starts with what we can observe and measure. Only after understanding the real-world phenomena do we abstract those insights into mathematical frameworks. This grounding ensures that our models remain relevant and accurate. I understand that this might feel like a significant departure from traditional ways of thinking. Change is rarely easy, especially when it challenges long-standing frameworks, but consider the possibilities. Triadic logic offers the potential for deeper insights. By modeling the full scope of interactions within a system, it allows us to uncover patterns and relationships that binary logic would obscure. Imagine being able to predict not just the outcome of a single interaction, but the ripple effects across an entire network. It also enables improved problem-solving. Fields like ecology, economics, and engineering grapple with complex systems every day. Triadic logic provides a framework to address these challenges more effectively by modeling the interdependencies that drive system behavior. Finally, triadic logic enhances predictive power. By accounting for the relationships among three interconnected variables, it creates models that reflect reality more accurately. This leads to better predictions and, ultimately, better decision-making. Triadic logic isn't just a new tool. It's a new lens through which to view the world. By recognizing and modeling interdependent relationships, we gain a richer and more nuanced understanding of the systems that surround us. It's a mindset shift that doesn't just expand our perspective. It equips us to navigate complexity with greater clarity and confidence. We've explored the conceptual shift from binary thinking to triadic logic, but now it's time to take the next step, translating this framework into mathematical models. Triadic logic isn't just a philosophical tool, it's a rigorous process for describing and predicting the behavior of complex systems. By linking logical relationships to mathematical formulations and grounding them in real-world data, we create models that bridge the abstract and the tangible. This process mirrors the structure of triadic logic itself, unfolding in 3 interdependent steps. First, we construct a logical model of the system based on observations and evidence. Then, we translate that logical model into mathematical axioms that express the system's relationships. Finally, we ground these mathematical expressions in reality by using real-world measurements to calibrate the model. Together, these steps form a cohesive pathway for understanding systems in both conceptual and quantitative terms. The process begins with logical modeling, which starts with observation. By studying a system, we identify its key variables, 3 critical elements that define its behavior. Next, we examine how these variables interact with one another. Are they mutually dependent, such as in a balanced system? Do they follow a sequential chain of causality? Or do they form a feedback loop, reinforcing one another over time? Based on these observations, we select the appropriate triadic structure to represent the system, such as coexistence, reinforcement, or causality. This logical model provides the foundation for everything that follows. Once we've constructed the logical model, we move to the second step, identifying the corresponding mathematical axioms. These axioms are derived directly from the logic of the triad and describe the relationships among the variables in precise mathematical terms. For example, if the system is governed by mutual equivalence, we express these relationships as equalities. If the system operates through a chain of implications, we translate those into inequalities. By tailoring the axioms to the specific nature of the system, we ensure that the mathematics accurately reflects the observed dynamics. However, mathematics alone isn't enough. To create models that are both meaningful and actionable, we must ground them in reality. This is the third step, where real-world measurements come into play. By observing or experimenting, we gather data on the key variables within the system. Using this data, we calculate the coefficients or constants required for the mathematical expressions. Finally, we validate the model by testing its predictions against actual outcomes. This iterative process ensures that the model not only captures the logical structure of the system but also aligns with its real-world behavior. The result is a model that bridges conceptual logic and empirical observation. Once validated, these models allow us to derive further insights. We can use them to predict how the system will behave under different conditions, analyze its stability, and even uncover universal principles that apply to other systems with similar triadic structures. These aren't just static equations, they're tools for exploration and discovery. This triadic process is more than a method for one discipline, it's a universal approach. Whether applied to physical systems, social dynamics, or economic networks, it provides a structured way to move from observation to understanding, from concept to calculation. By embracing this framework, we equip ourselves to navigate the complexity of the real world with clarity and precision. The power of triadic logic lies in its ability to unlock understanding across a wide range of fields. Wherever systems are governed by interdependent relationships, the triadic process provides a consistent framework to model, predict, and even influence their behavior. By beginning with observations, constructing logical models, translating those into mathematical axioms, and grounding them in real-world data, triadic logic allows us to move seamlessly from understanding to action. In economics, consider the interconnected forces of supply, demand, and price. These 3 variables are in constant interplay, forming a triadic relationship that governs market dynamics. Supply represents the availability of a product, demand reflects consumer interest, and price acts as the mediator between them. The first step in applying the triadic process is to model this relationship logically. Observing the market reveals that supply increases tend to drive prices lower when demand stays constant, while demand spikes push prices higher when supply remains unchanged. Price, in turn, influences supply by encouraging or discouraging production and shapes demand by attracting or deterring consumers. These interconnections can be captured as a logical triad of mutual influence. From this logical model, we derive the corresponding mathematical axioms that describe these relationships. These axioms reflect the direct dependencies among the three variables, ensuring that their interplay is represented accurately. For example, an increase in price is not an isolated factor. It propagates through supply and demand in ways determined by the logical structure of the system. Finally, to ground the model in reality, we use real-world data. By collecting observations on pricing trends, sales volumes, and inventory levels, we calibrate the mathematical model with coefficients specific to the market under study. This validated model doesn't just explain past behavior. It predicts how changes in any one variable, such as a sudden rise in demand, will ripple through supply and price to reshape the market. Biology offers another compelling application of triadic logic, particularly in ecosystems where predators, prey, and vegetation form an interdependent system. Predators rely on prey for food, prey depend on vegetation as their food source, and vegetation grows in an environment shaped by both. The balance among these three elements determines the health of the ecosystem. To apply the triadic process, we start with observations. When vegetation declines, prey populations suffer from reduced food availability, leading to a decline in predator numbers as their food source diminishes. However, this dynamic isn't linear or static. Fewer predators allow prey populations to recover, which in turn enables vegetation to rebound. The logical triad captures this cyclical balance, where each component both supports and constrains the others. From this logical understanding, we derive mathematical axioms that describe these interdependent relationships. For instance, the state of the prey population is directly influenced by vegetation levels and predator activity, and changes in one propagate through the triad. These axioms provide a mathematical structure that mirrors the logic of the ecosystem without relying on oversimplified cause and effect assumptions. Finally, field studies provide the empirical data needed to ground this model in reality. Biologists measure population sizes, reproduction rates, and vegetation levels, calibrating the model to reflect the unique dynamics of the specific ecosystem. With this validated model, we can predict how external factors like habitat loss or species reintroduction will impact the delicate balance among predators, prey, and vegetation. From financial markets to ecological systems, the triadic process offers a universal framework for analyzing systems where interdependence is key. By focusing on logical relationships and grounding mathematical models in observation, triadic logic reveals patterns and behaviors that binary frameworks can never capture. It's a powerful tool for understanding the complexities of our world and navigating the intricate interconnections that define it. The triadic process isn't just a method, it's a mindset that transforms how we understand the world. By following its steps, we achieve several profound benefits. Our mathematical models are customized to reflect the unique dynamics of the system under study, enhancing their accuracy and relevance. Grounding these models in empirical data ensures they mirror real-world behaviors rather than abstract ideals. The approach offers flexibility, allowing us to choose the tools that best fit each situation rather than forcing a single framework onto every problem. Most importantly, it provides deeper insights by deriving universal principles directly from the logical and mathematical structure of each system. This is why the triadic approach is so powerful. It avoids the pitfalls of one-size-fits-all thinking. Returning to Stephen Wolfram's ambitious efforts, we see the danger of starting with a fixed mathematical framework and trying to apply it universally. that approach risks missing the unique dynamics of individual systems. In contrast, triadic logic begins with observations and builds from the ground up, customizing both logical models and mathematical tools to fit the specific relationships at play. But more than just a tool for understanding, triadic logic is a way to empower you to explore the complexities of your own field or interest. Consider the systems that intrigue you most. How might they be reimagined through the lens of triadic logic? In medicine, the interplay of genetics, environment, and lifestyle could form a triadic relationship that shapes health outcomes. In environmental science, the interactions among air quality, public policy, and industrial activity might reveal paths to addressing climate change. In technology, understanding how hardware, software, and user behavior influence one another could transform how we design and implement digital systems. By identifying the key variables in these systems, modeling their relationships logically, and grounding those models in real-world data, triadic logic equips us to uncover patterns and relationships that were previously hidden. It invites us to move from abstraction to actionable understanding. As we conclude, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've explored together. We began by recognizing the limitations of binary thinking and the rigidity of traditional frameworks. We embraced the richness of triadic logic, discovering how it provides a more nuanced and accurate way to model complex systems. We learned to translate logical relationships into mathematical expressions and to validate those models with real-world data, ensuring they reflect the system's true nature. In doing so, we've aligned with the wisdom of Euler, who taught us that no single mathematical system can encapsulate all of reality. By respecting complexity, starting from first principles, and being adaptable in our approach, we open ourselves to deeper understanding and more meaningful insights. As you take these ideas forward, I invite you to challenge assumptions. Are the frameworks you've been using sufficient to capture the complexities you observe? Or might they benefit from the triadic perspective? Embrace complexity. Don't shy away from systems that feel overwhelming. Instead, look for the patterns and interconnections that bring clarity. And most importantly, collaborate. Some of the greatest breakthroughs come from the intersection of disciplines, where diverse perspectives illuminate challenges in unexpected ways. The universe is not a series of isolated parts, but a symphony of interwoven relationships. To understand it, we must adopt methods that honor this interconnectedness. Triadic logic offers us a lens to see these relationships clearly, a framework to navigate their complexity, and a pathway to act on what we learn. By doing so, we don't just expand our knowledge, we deepen our appreciation for the intricate beauty that surrounds us. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and if you made it to the end, don't forget to subscribe. Together, let's continue to explore, question, and seek out the patterns that connect us all.